Hey everybody, I want to take a moment here and send an encouraging, hopefully vision piece for believing God for his provision in our finances as we're preparing to go on these trips, and also give some instruction on how you can partner with him to see him provide for what he's called you to do. And that's the heart of what we believe here as a church is, man, if God calls you to do something, he's going to provide for you as well. And we don't want money to ever be the reason we don't obey God, a lack of money to be a reason we don't obey God, but we also don't want laziness and irresponsibility to be the reason we don't have money, right? And so I wanted to share a couple stories in Matthew 14, Matthew 15, and Matthew 16. There's a lot of discussion about bread and God's provision. And in Matthew 14, verses 31 through 21, we see a giant crowd out in the middle of nowhere that are hungry. And I have it open here and I'm looking at it. But and the disciples, the disciples were like, hey, we got to send these people away. They're hungry. And Jesus said, you feed them. And the disciples were obviously overwhelmed by that task. They didn't have a giant food truck with them. And so, but basically Jesus asked, the need was identified. He asked what they had. And in that situation, they had 7 loaves. In Matthew 15, the same thing happened. And they had 5 loaves. Both times they had a couple fish. And, but in Matthew, in Matthew 14, there was 5,000. In Matthew, there was 7,000. Or 4,000, 4,000 in Matthew 15, 29 through 31. And in both situations, a similar pattern happened. I want to encourage you to take a look at it yourself in both stories. But there's a pattern that happened in both stories I think is important to point out. Number one, the need was identified in both situations, and the need was overwhelming. Feeding that many people, 5,000 to 7,000 people, 5,000 to 4,000 people, and that's not including women and children. So could have been anywhere from, 5 to 10 plus thousand people. That would actually cost more than all of our mission trips combined, to feed them to be full. And that's what was, that was the need that God himself was calling them to meet. And it was overwhelming to the disciples, obviously. And then when he asked them, what do you have? They're like, we don't have much. And I don't know about you, but when I'm believing God for a miracle, especially with these trips, like when he's like, what do you have? I'm like, I don't feel like I don't have that much. I definitely know I'm probably closer to having what the disciples needed than the disciples were, but to having what I needed. But I don't have what I need. I need a miracle here. And so, but they identified the need, and then Jesus asked them what they had, number 2. And then 3, he gave them instructions. He said, take this, have the people sit down, put it in baskets. I'm going to bless it. And then you go hand it out to people. And they got instructions that they could obey. And so 4th, they stepped out in obedience and did what he asked. And I don't know about you, but if I am that disciple who has been told to go feed thousands of people with a few pieces of bread and some fish, I would be leaving Jesus with the baskets thinking, what is going to happen? This is awkward. I think it would be a humorous moment. I would love to have seen the look on the disciples' faces as they're walking away with like a basket with like a few scraps of bread, and then a multitude of people waiting for them to be fed, waiting for them to feed them. And so, but as they obeyed, God did the miracle, and the bread kept coming, the fish kept coming, and they fed everybody. And both times they had leftovers, in Matthew 16, he talks about it because they're getting into a boat. He's like, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees. And they're like, oh no, he's mad we don't have enough bread. And he's like, do you still not understand? Don't you remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? Both times he didn't just provide enough, he provided above and beyond. He went above and beyond what they were asking and what they needed. And that's just the nature of who God is. But that pattern is really important. We have identified the need. We know how much our trips are. And now what you have is something different for everybody, right? So some of us have savings, some of us have investments, some of us have skills that we can use to earn extra money. Some of us have, things we can sell. I don't know, but what everybody has is a network of relationships that we can reach out to. And that's why we're doing these newsletters. We've asked everybody to send out 25 newsletters of people to prayerfully select 25 people for each adult, people that you feel would be interested in learning about your trip, praying for you in our teams as we're on our trips, and even being a part of investing in that trip financially. Now, the benefit of that is what you're doing by inviting people into that is you're inviting them to have an investment in what God is doing in the nation that you're going to. We have a young girl in our life group, a friend of my son's who attends, and she actually goes to a different church on Sundays with her family, but comes to our life group, and she's going on a mission trip with them to go rebuild some houses in some areas of poverty in Louisiana. And I've never done that, but I got to send her some money to support her trip. And now I'm getting to be a part of helping out in Louisiana through supporting her. And to me, it's a meaningful thing. Some people, it might not be a meaningful thing. Some people might get your letters or hear about your trip and might think, oh, they're just asking for money or whatever. But that really isn't the heart of what we're doing at all. What we're doing is inviting people to be a part of what God's doing on the earth and to spread the word that God is moving in the nations. And Jesus did say, preach the gospel to all creation, make disciples of all the nations, that everyone in the world should hear the gospel of the kingdom, and then the end shall come. And so we're called to do this as the church, and we're being obedient to the scriptures by going, and we're inviting other people to be a part of that. And that's actually a meaningful thing. And so you don't want to discount what you're doing because of the awkwardness of it. It's a bold thing. Paul, all throughout scripture, all throughout, when Paul was alive, scripture, he's thanking people for their gifts, and he even kind of rebuked, I think it was the church at Corinth for not providing for him. And I'm not saying we should do that, but the worker is worth their wages. And there's something about the people of God pulling their resources together to send people on mission and to advance the kingdom. And that's the way it's been in the church throughout its origin. Hey, they're going to go take the gospel to this new place. Let's pull together some money and send them on their way. And that's been a part of the tradition of the church since the very beginning. And so since the first disciples were sent out, the people, Jesus sent them out 2 by 2 with nothing, but as they were on their mission, walking throughout Galilee and Israel for 3 years, they had a church of people that were walking with them that would provide for them out of their own needs, to feed them and clothe them and all sorts of things. And then Jesus did miracles as well, like helping them find the coin in the fish and multiplying loaves and bread and loaves and fishes. And so there's so much involved here. But for us, what we need to do is identify what we need, identify what we have, receive the instructions from God about what we should do with that. Maybe he's not telling you to empty your savings account. Maybe he is. I don't know. We're walking by faith here. We're not just striving in our own strength to make this happen. We're going to do it by faith. And then lastly, then we need to obey. We need to obey what God says, even if it hurts or if it doesn't hurt. When I say hurt, I mean, it's like, okay, that's a lot. I don't want to sell that guitar, but I'll sell it. Or I don't want to sell that stock, or I don't want to go do this or go do that in order to pay for this. But if God's leading you to do it, he's after your heart. He's more after your heart than anything else. And then lastly, when we obey by faith, God does the miracle. And that's obviously all throughout scripture. When the people of God obey by faith, he does provide. And so bless you guys. If you have any questions, if you need any more advice or counsel, let me know. Love to encourage and build your faith throughout this process as we are walking out what he's called us to do. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.